rivals go head-to-head this weekend when the Pirates face the Cubs at Wrigley.
Swing and a miss. He struck him out.
The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
As you get older, you're generally, if you're reasonably bright, you don't get offended by stuff. When you're 15, 16, 17, 18, college kids, a lot of the hate on Twitter is college kids. They're little boys. Mommy's packing their underwear, folding their underwear, packing their lunch. They're little kids. Life's been good. They haven't lived through a depression. You know, they never had to serve. Oh, my God, they get offended so easily. That's why comedians have stopped going to college campuses. That's why Chris Rock is like, I'm not going to do college campuses. Jerry Seinfeld, I'm not going to do college campuses. I was talking to Larry the Cable Guy about 6 months ago. He's like, and that guy makes $75,000 like a show. He's like, I don't want to do college campuses. He goes, 20-year-olds these days, politically correct, they're offended by everybody. He goes, I'm a comedian. I tell jokes. They're uncomfortable. And I watched all these little college boys because I went to Twitter. Danny Thompson and Corey Biggs and Cody Howard and Josh, and there's a lot of little young guy names. I hate Calipari. Do you see after they beat Notre Dame, he didn't give us credit. Dude, he's not in the credit business. Visa is. He's in the recruit NBA players and go undefeated business. Calipari after the game said, you know what? We had a bad game. We didn't play particularly well. Notre Dame played well. And then finally at the end we sort of got it going. Well, that's what happened. Yeah, the only way Notre Dame with one NBA player is going to beat Kentucky with 8 is if Kentucky's off their game. When Kentucky's on their game, they will dominate. Did you notice what happened at the end of the game when Kentucky was like, bros, 9 minutes left? Kentucky went 9 for 9. Notre Dame went 0 for 3. That's how that works. When I've got all NBA players and you have one and a guy who may pitch in the bigs. Okay, the first half, Kentucky did play poorly. That's why you were in the game. In the second half, like the 95-96 Chicago Bulls, like the Spurs now, once again have won 13 out of 16 down the stretch, like LeBron's teams get better. Once they click it, turn it on, they are better. Kentucky missed 8 chippies in the first half. Calipari was laughing at half. He goes, we'll get it together. What happened in that game when Kentucky in the second half went, fellas, undefeated history here. They shot 75%. They didn't miss a shot the last 12 minutes of the game because they had better players than you. And the only way you could ever beat them is if you played great and they played poorly. And you're not talented enough to make them play poorly for an entire game. That is, let's hear one of Calipari's bites after the game. Here, let's just do another one.
I don't know if our breakdowns until I watched the tape were us or Notre Dame being that good offensively. We were just fighting to stay in the game, to be honest with you, and it was nice to see how it finished for these kids.
Yeah, they are better than you. That's why they're favored and may not lose a basketball game. Okay, this whole thing about the losing team wanting credit, get lost. That's not what sports is about. It's about winners and losers. You're a loser. And the better team that has better players, when they figured out your little shtick, dominated you. They didn't miss a shot for the last 12 minutes of the game. You can't do that at the Y against fat guys. You can't do that down the street. You got to be, college kids now are offended by everything. That's why comedians won't go to college campuses. Bill Maher is outrageous. Bill Maher is smarter and more successful than 100% of those college kids at Cal that were offended by him. Get over it. God, Kentucky. Listen, I think Duke can beat Kentucky. I think Wisconsin can beat Kentucky. I'm not sure if Michigan State can beat Kentucky, but they are better. It's really funny on social media how outraged people get. I'll give you an example of take the 95-96 Chicago Bulls. That's the greatest defensive team I've ever seen in NBA history. And I would argue it's probably the greatest team I've ever seen. I mean, it's like, it's funny, the Chicago Bears, remember that Chicago Bears team with that great defense? It's funny, the best NFL team I ever saw, it could have been the Bears, and the best NBA team could have been the Bulls. But the 95-96 Bulls, they had Rodman. Defensively, they had Pippen. They had Jordan. They were unbelievable. Well, here's what's funny about that team. That team lost 10 regular season games and 4 playoff games. 14 losses. Best team I've ever seen. And almost had 10 other losses. But it's interesting who they lost to. They lost to, like, some really bad teams in the regular season. But when they played good teams in games that mattered, they annihilated them. Because for Kentucky and for the Bulls and for the 98 Yankees and for the Patriots who are 18-0, you know who you're really battling? You're battling yourself. You're battling apathy. You're battling boredom. I mean, Kentucky this year struggled against Georgia and, you know, some Arkansas, some average SEC teams. Then they clobber a really good West Virginia team. But let's go back to the 95-96 Chicago Bulls. Here's what's fascinating. So that Bulls team lost 10 regular season games, 14 games overall, and had 10 narrow wins against teams they were far better than. But if you go back to the 96 NBA playoffs, this is what's fascinating to me. If you go back to game ones against the Heat, the Knicks, the Magic, and the Sonics, and we all know that if you win game one of an NBA playoff series, you have an exponentially better chance to win the series. All players know that, especially veteran teams like the 95-96 Bulls. LeBron knows that. You know, Tim Duncan knows that. Game one, you get the 95-96 Bulls' best effort. Do you know what they did? They lost to Toronto that year. They struggled with average teams. Do you know what they did against the Heat, the Knicks, the Magic, and the Sonics? By the way, the Magic, the Sonics, and the Knicks were great teams. I mean, the Magic and the Sonics were great. In those game ones, they won by 17, 38, 7, and 17. 20 points a game. The idea that Kentucky gives you the same effort every game and every half, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. Kentucky is better than everybody in this tournament. Doesn't mean they'll win it. They could have a terrible last 9 minutes against a really good team like Duke. But Notre Dame, the reason you're in that game is because they're not focused and they're not driven. And when they were, they went 12 minutes and they didn't miss a basket. And they made sure down the stretch you didn't hit one. So get over it. Stop being offended by everything. Social media uproar from little Cody and little Joshy on social media. Moms still folding their underwear and packing their lunch. Notre Dame, the only reason that baby's close is Kentucky hadn't focused in yet. They did. They beat you like a narc at a biker's rally. Tag! People wear me out, man. I was in Florida all weekend. I should be in a great mood. Stanzik and I down there surfing, having a great time. Heard brought to you by Regis. New way to work. Call 1-800-OFFICES. We got that Religious Freedom Act in Indiana. We got the best coach in college basketball histories in the Final Four, and it's not who you think. And Chris Mullen, what is Chris Mullen thinking? Wants the St. John's job? That's an awful job. I love Chris Mullen. He's one of my all-time. What are you doing taking the St. John's job? That's an awful job in 2015. Dude, you know, guys get old and they start collecting classic cars and they start reminiscing, and it's, you know how guys get when they're 50 and 60 and their prostate falls out of their pants. They start reminiscing about the old days, and Chris Mullen's like 50 years old now. Chris Mullen's like, oh, my God, I want to go to St. John's. Oh, my God. I want to go to St. John's. It'll be like the old days, 1986, 87. Dude, I'm going to text Chris Mullen during the break and say, what in the hell are you doing? In a regressing conference with horrible facilities in a city, New York, that doesn't create the high school basketball talent they did 15 years ago. It's an awful job.
Putting style in black T-shirts. It's Colin Cowherd, the Thundering Herd podcast.
So, this is NFL news. I don't know how it affects anybody except Atlanta. NFL is expected to suspend my guy, Falcon President Rich McKay, from the competition committee. Wow, and take a draft pick from Atlanta for piping crowd noise into its stadium past 2 years, Adam Schefter's been told. So last couple of years, Atlanta's been piping in crowd noise. Hasn't helped much, clearly. Why don't they pipe in some better linebackers? League will hand down the discipline tomorrow. Why don't they pipe in a better secondary? All right. Rich McKay got in trouble. That crowd noise thing, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of cheesy to me. I don't know. And also, especially in college football, like all these colleges now, they don't even huddle, you know, and they do all the signs from the side, like Oregon. Oregon's completely unaffected by crowd noise. Oregon goes to the line, looks over to the coach, and goes. Their crowd noise just isn't that big of a deal. It really isn't. This is what I hear when I wake up in the morning. People cheering for me. My children. Yeah, I heard. Oh, by the way, this just came down from the NFL. The Patriots are facing a fine for pumping in excellence into Foxborough for the last decade. So this is the NCAA has taken the lead here, responding to Indiana's religious freedom law. Indiana has a governor, Mike Pence, says the religious freedom bill he signed into law Thursday is not about turning back the clock and old-time bigotry, where you could refuse service to blacks at restaurants, set up drinking fountains for whites only. The NCAA and its president, Mark Emmert, kind of disagree. They said this law is about protecting discrimination, effectively allowing businesses to deny service to gays and lesbians based on religious beliefs. Gay marriage, it's happening and will be allowed everywhere within the decade. Momentum's the most powerful thing in the world, and you can't even see it. You can't touch it. It's not really grabbable, but it's real. The tide has turned. The millennials don't share the same opinions of 50-plussers. They could move the NCAA headquarters out of downtown Indy. Remember the Super Bowl, Arizona, the MLK holiday? They were going to move the Super Bowl quickly out of Arizona. Here's the thing, okay, and this law is very complex. If you really read it thoroughly, there's 20 states that have similar laws, similar in some fashion or another. Charles Barkley came out, crushed it, so did Reggie Miller. I've always had this belief when it comes to politics, when it comes to financial stuff, you can go right. You can be very conservative. I'm anti-union. That's seen as conservative. Because I'm somebody that, has a part of a couple businesses. To some degree, this show is a business, right? Obviously. I run it pretty conservatively. But when it comes to social issues, my feeling's always been lean toward accepting others. Lean toward inclusiveness. And you'll never be embarrassed in front of your kids 30 years later. You'll always be accepting and inclusive. And if you are going to, in a very rigid state, never forget the Klan started in Indiana. It's a very, very conservative state. Alabama, Indiana are two of the most conservative states in this country. If you're going to go rigid, there are going to be times 30, 40 years later you look embarrassing. And not accepting people based on, sexual orientation or beliefs is just going to look awful in 40 years. I know today you're absolutely sure I'm wrong on this, and they were wrong in Alabama 50 years ago, 60 years ago. When it comes to human beings, be accepting and be inclusive. You'll never be embarrassed explaining where you stood to your kids. Just be a good person. To me, this isn't about politics. It's about decency. Accept others. Mark Emmert's on Katz's Corner on ESPNU today after us. So, I think if you look at the history of rigid states, some of their former policies 30, 40 years later are embarrassing. Like what happened in Alabama, it's embarrassing. That is a stain forever on that state. Forever. How good's Tom Izzo? Listen to this stat. He's the best coach in modern NCAA tournament history, according to numbers by far. To illustrate the method they use, a typical number 7 seed would expect to win about 0.9 games per tournament on average. Okay? If you look in the history of the NCAA tournament and where Michigan State has been seeded, they should have won 30 games. Under Izzo, they've won over 45. Second place is Rick Pitino, who through the years should have won 41 games, he's won 53. And I'll tell you, Rick Pitino has maybe outcoached Tom Izzo because Rick Pitino came within an overtime of the Final Four, and that team can't shoot. That team cannot shoot. I watched Louisville 3 times. They're the only team in this tournament I whiffed on. I had them losing to Irvine. Yesterday in the second half in overtime, they shot 6 of 32. They can't shoot. He got to overtime away from the Final Four. They are so bad, they went in the second half 12 minutes without a half-court offensive field goal. Louisville offensively, there are, and I'm not joking, high school teams that are better. They're awful. And he came within a basket or 2 of making the Final Four. Izzo Pitino, that's as good as they get.
Want more of the Herd? The Thundering Herd Podcast.
All right, Seth Greenberg, Virginia's out of the tournament means I'm in a great mood. College basketball analyst. I look at this Final Four, and I think Duke's the best, or Kentucky's the best, Duke, probably then Wisconsin close, Michigan State. But very rarely do I think all 4 teams have a chance of winning it all, Seth. Would you be shocked if any of the 4 teams won it?
I'd be most shocked if Michigan State won.
You would be.
Just because they can get stuck in the half court a little bit. Wisconsin, Kentucky, would not be shocked. That could go any which way.
Hey, if Wisconsin shoots well, watch out.
And Wisconsin, Duke, or Kentucky, Duke, I wouldn't be shocked. And look, you never bet against Tom. He understands the essence of his opponent better than any coach in America, and he does a great job of creating a cause. But I'd say 3 to 4 legitimately have a good shot.
Okay, so it's Kentucky against Wisconsin. And, listen, there's NBA players on both teams.
Yes, there are.
And there's a star player on both teams. Towns is going to be an NBA All-Star, in my opinion. Kaminsky will play in the league. I don't know how great he'll be. But I'll tell you, Wisconsin can shoot. Are you worried about Kentucky's half-court offense?
I'm not, because when Kentucky needs to have good half-court offense, they have good half-court offense. Think about the end of the Notre Dame game. They go 10 minutes without missing a field goal.
Yeah.
All right? Where'd they get the ball? On the block. Besides Aaron Harrison's 3 that was like from Akron. It wasn't. They were playing in Cleveland. He shot it from Akron. But in the end of the game, where did Kentucky get the ball? They got the ball right where they wanted to get the ball.
Why did they wait the whole game?
Karl Anthony Towns. Well, I think it was more the defensive end. I thought they got out of sync defensively. And I thought in the first half, Notre Dame pushed Kentucky away from the basket. The pressure, the ball pressure, pushed them away from the basket. Remember, everyone says, how do you beat Kentucky? Colin, you have to figure out how to beat Kentucky with your personnel. It's not how do you beat Kentucky and here's the master plan, because if you don't have the players to fit that master plan,
doesn't matter.
It's not going to matter.
Yeah.
So what you've got to do is, like with your personnel, Bob Huggins, with that personnel, you have to come up with a scenario how they're going to win the game.
So Wisconsin.
So they ask us on SportsCenter, how does West Virginia beat Kentucky?
How does Wisconsin do it?
Well, Wisconsin, they invert their offense. They bring Kaminsky away from the basket. Which
that will
pulls out Willie Cauley-Stein, which enables you to drive it a little bit. Not Wisconsin's strong suit.
That's what I'm saying.
They also can invert their offense and post up their big wings.
So you're trying to pull Kentucky's length in this game.
Like Georgia did a little bit.
Pull them away from the basket.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't look at Wisconsin as a team that, even if they do that, breaks you down in open space.
No, they don't. But then you can Sam Decker, the small forward, 6'9". The Decker-Trey Lyles matchup is going to be an interesting matchup to watch.
Okay. So then let's go to the next one, Duke and Michigan State. Listen, Duke has really, in my opinion, probably the best player in the tournament in Okafor.
Not playing that way, though.
No, he's not. Like, he disappeared yesterday for long, long stretches. Right. But they've got an elite interior player. They've got shooters.
Yes,
they've got mid-range
Very
guys.
good backcourt.
So I look at Duke, and I look at Michigan State, and could it get ugly?
No, it won't get ugly. Here's the thing. You got an 8-man rotation. 8 is enough. You got 8 McDonald's All-Americans. Let's not cry over spilt milk here.
Okay.
I feel really bad for Coach K. He's only got 8 McDonald's All-Americans to coach. It's terrible. The chemistry is so good. And now Winslow puts pressure on the defense. The backcourt of Duke. Colin, the backcourt of Duke. How good are they?
Yeah. It's interesting. Seth Greenberg joining us, the Herd on ESPN Radio. The rating for the Kentucky game was the highest in cable TV history. Calipari got banged on. I don't get it. Because he, quote, didn't give Notre Dame credit. Well, here's the truth. Down the stretch, all great teams do this, by the way, that Jordan's Bulls did it 95-96. They lost to Toronto, but they destroyed playoff teams. Couldn't I just argue when Calipari said, we didn't play particularly well? Well, they didn't.
They weren't at their best. But he also, people, if Cal says it, people lose their minds. He also said they had a great game plan. He also said in the first half they didn't do a good job guarding the back cuts. He also talked about them getting in the lane. I think there's a bigger story. I'm going to give you a bigger story. All right? I just left SportsCenter earlier, and they put up the number of Final Fours. And they had Mike Krzyzewski, 12.
Mike Krzyzewski, 12.
Tom Izzo, 7.
Yeah.
Bo Ryan, 2.
2.
And they had Cal at 4. Now, I got a question. He's been to 4 at Kentucky. Now, you follow basketball, especially in the postseason. Right?
Yeah.
All right, so did UMass make the Final Four?
Yeah.
They made it by Meadowlands. I was at the game. They don't count that because of the quote-unquote NCAA, which they were never able to prove. Cal had nothing to do with it. They took that Final Four away, so we can't mention, oh, by the way, I was at that game. They were in the Final Four. Did Memphis team get to the championship game?
Yeah.
I was at that game.
Yeah.
That was the game. Chalmers, boom, makes the big shot. Wait a second. We can't talk about it. The guy's been to 6 Final Fours. He hasn't been to 4 Final Fours.
But
NCAA, grow up, shut up. They've been to 6 Final Fours. Enough of this. Vacating wins. They played the games. Shut up.
it's funny. We don't like Calipari, so we criticize him. We like Pete Carroll. He had wins vacated. Nobody mentions that. We like Pete. Calipari, little...
You either like him or you hate him.
Yeah, he's a little... No, listen. There are things about him that I think are a little...
What? I love when he goes, what now?
But in the end, I know everybody bangs on the one and done. It's the empowerment of the young athlete. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I think Duke, Kentucky will get...
How good a drama would that be?
It will be one of the all-time great. It is, to me, the best college basketball game in a decade.
Let me ask you this. I said it yesterday. I actually said it just to stir people up, and it worked. I said it's good versus evil, but people want to know who's good and who's evil. But here's the, like...
It is funny, isn't it, though?
Oh, it gets... People, I mean, literally, talk about this today. People will lose their minds.
Duke has always been, it's this is American royalty. Duke's almost likable. They're almost the hard scrabble kids. I love the fact that now America will root for Duke.
Yeah, I mean, well, because they're rooting against Kentucky.
Yes.
All right, but
the coach, who do you root for? Beyond, not the guy. What story do you root for?
I'm rooting for perfection. I think it's a great story. I mean, historic.
Yeah.
The number of wins to to get to, what is it, 40 or 41, whatever they have to get to. For that to be accomplished, that's in the culture of college basketball today, to be able to run through the season undefeated with the pressure these kids are under, the microscope these kids are under.
Conference tournaments, the big tournament.
And started in the Bahamas, ended with the Final Four. Every game is dissected. You're down, you're up. Think about how good Kentucky's been at the end of games. To finish this thing off, it's unbelievable. Indiana was better offensively. That 76 team was...
Yes. Benson and May.
Yeah, but you know what their defensive field goal percentage was? And I'm not a numbers guy.
Right.
I didn't coach by that. I coached by field. That's probably why I'm hanging out talking to you. But their opponents shot 45% against them.
So Indiana's defense,
like we think about Coach Knight, we think about great. They were okay. They played against more mature teams. Everyone says, well, it's a different year. They played against different teams. Yeah, they did.
This Kentucky team?
Ooh, good luck getting to the rim against those dudes.
Yeah. Seth Greenberg, great seeing you, man.
Of all the things I had to do today, I said, I'm getting to Colin.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
We do this with the Olympics. The Olympics get a rating, and then Olympic fans are like, see, everybody loves skiing. Nobody cares about skiing, except people who ski. Skiing on its own can't get a rating. If it's part of a patriotic package wrapped in red, white, and blue, it'll get a rating when you're rooting for the country against Austria. But nobody cares. Horse racing is in a tough spot right now. It's not a great sport to be involved in unless you're, one of the top breeders or top trainers or top owners. Horse racing's, but if there's a horse, California Chrome, that can win the Triple Crown, it'll get a huge rating. But it doesn't mean anything because horse racing, if you don't have a Triple Crown winner, nobody cares anymore. And you get this with golf. Golf, increasingly, nobody's watching. Tiger getting a big number at the Masters doesn't mean America's gravitating toward golf. They're just gravitating toward Tiger winning another Masters. So you got to remember, in the Olympics, curling gets a rating. Tiger gets a number if he's playing at the Perkins Open, okay? It doesn't matter. When USC dominated the Pac-10, as it was called then, in the Pete Carroll era, the conference has never been weaker. It was awful. It was awful. The second-best program was Cal. That's like Vanderbilt being the second-best SEC program. USC was getting 10 of the top 11 players in California. USC was loaded. Clay Matthews had to walk on. They wouldn't offer him a Scully. He couldn't start. Went into the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. They would go into California, get the best players every year for like 5-6 years. The conference was awful. The SEC had 7 really good teams. None of them could beat USC. USC was great. But nobody else in the conference even rose to pretty good. Don't confuse USC's greatness with the conference's dominance. Don't confuse the health of college basketball for Duke, Kentucky getting a monster number. There's a big difference. If you have 9 kids in your family and 8 do meth and 1 goes to Harvard, it's not a successful family. The Big Ten right now is atrocious in football. Ohio State's great. And I do think Michigan and Penn State will get their act together. I like the coaches. But the Big Ten right now is a mess. Ohio State's great. They are what USC was in the Pac-12, a complete outlier otherwise in the conference. So, as far as Gonzaga, this morning, Dan, you had an interesting kind of perspective on Gonzaga. Like, the sense is, you said, like, Mark Few's not a Hall of Famer, he can't win the big game, right?
Yeah, I didn't mean to, slight Mark Few. He's a great guy. I said great guy, great coach, but they can never get over the hump, and they've never been to a Final Four, and I don't think they have enough there to win a national title. It's a little hot take.
It was a fresh, hot sports take by Dan Stanzik. But here's the thing. Not everybody can be McDonald's. Why can't you be Arby's? Why can't you be Taco Bell? Why can't you be Kia? Why can't you be Mountain Dew? Why can't you be Pepsi? Not everybody can be Coke. That's Duke and Kentucky and Carolina, Kansas. So Gonzaga from Denver West is probably outside of Arizona and UCLA, the third best program. For them to get 3-star athletes and get to the Sweet 16 is unbelievable. In Little Spokane, Washington, that's unbelievable. They get the kid from Kentucky, the transfer, who couldn't get on the floor. They go to USC or get Arvydas Sabonis' kid, and they're very good players. But Duke's center is going to be an NBA All-Star. That Towns kid for Kentucky, he's going to be a first-team All-NBAer in 6 years. So Gonzaga doesn't get that guy. So I think you have to judge success differently. Duke, if you look at the teams in the Final Four, Karl Anthony Towns, probably the best player, Kentucky. Okafor, first or second best player, Duke. Kaminsky and Decker, NBA players. Michigan State's got guys who will fill the back end of benches in the NBA. Gonzaga doesn't. So I think they do, for what they are, an incredible job. But Boise State football is not built to go into a major conference and win 13 games. They can win 11 and then knock off a good team, but they don't have the people. The great example is Utah. When Utah was in the second-tier conference, they beat Alabama. The minute they went into a major conference, they're a doormat in the Pac-12. They're a doormat. They were 13-0, 12-1, 12-1, because they had 1-2 big games a year. Now, doormat. Boise State in the SEC would be a doormat. They can beat Georgia in a one-off because they come in totally healthy, but they're not going to go toe-to-toe, week to week to week to week. They don't have the players. They don't have the depth. They don't have the volume of players. So, my bad. Matthew, what up, buddy? Go ahead.
Colin, love the show. Longtime fan. How you doing?
Good, bud.
I just want to talk about, you're spot on with this. And as far as ratings, I wanted to bring up a point that I think that could, maybe only thing that could fix the baseball ratings, the way they just dropped and dropped. You need to have teams that either you love, which everybody watches their favorite team, or you need to have the team that everybody hates, i.e. the New York Yankees. If the Yankees were a powerhouse and haven't played like they have lately, and they're making it to the World Series or the Final Four every year,
but you can't
people watch because they want to see them lose.
Yeah, but, Matt, you can't guarantee that. Here's the thing, Matthew. It's a very tricky situation. Baseball's ratings are very good locally. What's happened to the sport, it's no longer a national sport like the NBA or the NFL or March Madness. So baseball's very healthy, A, because they have so many games and so much inventory to sell, and their local ratings are terrific, but it's no longer a national sport. None of my listeners outside of Michigan can name the Tigers infield, but you can name the Spurs starting five and the Cavs starting five. Baseball is healthy financially and gets terrific local ratings. It is no longer outside of the Yankees really a national sport. Even a terrific franchise like the St. Louis Cardinals has almost no national ratings pull. So, and by the way, all over this great country, we have great local businesses. Who says you have to be national? You're not going to be number one if you're not national, but in Michigan they have Olga's. In Philadelphia they have Wawa's, convenience stores. They're unbelievable. They're unbelievable. They're not 7-Eleven. Okay? They're not Panera Bread. But Wawa's in Philadelphia owns its market. The Tigers in Detroit own their market. So baseball's very popular locally. It's just not a national sport. That's why I have moved off it over the last half decade. Yeah, Cardinals are now the Cardinals are not only big in St. Louis, they're big regionally. The Yankees are big nationally. The Red Sox are Red Sox are very similar to Dunkin' Donuts. The Yankees are Starbucks. Beijing, Brooklyn, the Yankees are big. The Red Sox are Dunkin' Donuts. Very big in Boston, huge. Big in New England, but the further away you get, nobody in China cares. So that's fine, though. Baseball's very healthy. They're making a lot of money. They're losing young people. Yes, they are. That is an issue.
You're in the Herd, the Thundering Herd podcast.
The Yankees are bigger than the Detroit Tigers. Doesn't mean they're better. When I was talking about what's regional and what's national, the NFL is bigger than baseball. You know, for a lot of people, they like baseball more than football. I don't, but a lot of people do. Send Easter smiles. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN for special offers starting at $29.99. So I don't get this. So apparently Rich McKay and the Atlanta Falcons are in trouble because they piped in crowd noise. Ray Farmer is expected to be suspended from his role as the Cleveland Browns general manager for his involvement in texting to the sideline during games. But Cleveland won't lose a draft pick. There could be heavy fines handed down. Now, let me ask you this. If I'm a general manager of ESPN Radio and I'm doing a remote and the GM texts me something, hey, there's a funny guy behind you, turn it. Why is that a suspension? Why would a general manager in the NFL be suspended for texting a coach? What kind of access to information would he have that's illegal? I don't understand that. There probably is a reason. I don't know.
Yeah, it has to be a competitive disadvantage or gaining some kind of advantage. The only thing I was confused by this story, too. The only thing I've been told is, say he hears something on the broadcast, and one of the broadcasters says, well, we talked to this coach, and this coach said this. My thing is, if you're the GM, why can't you just get the guy a headset, and then he won't be texting? You can just say it down the line.
You know, it's funny. I've thought about that for years. I have thought about that. It's funny you bring that up, that if I was a coordinator or a coach, wouldn't I have my headset on, but the broadcast piped into another ear so I could hear things? So I could pick stuff up on the broadcast? Is that illegal? It's potentially illegal. I don't know. There's got to be a reason the NFL suspends Ray Farmer as a general manager. It's probably a very simplistic one, and it probably is a competitive advantage. You could take information from a broadcast and pipe it down to your coaches. What if the Ray Farmer was like texting his coach, hey, good game plan. Craft beers on me in 10 minutes. Is that a suspension? He lose a draft pick for that? I mean, the Browns would screw up the draft pick anyway, so you might as well take it from him. But what if he's like texting, yo, Tom Brady is awesome. You guys are getting smoked again by Brady. And what can you do? It's Ray Farmer. Yeets. Anybody remember where I parked my car? It's Ray Farmer. I have knocked down 4 craft beers. Where did I park the Audi? No idea. Awesome. Tom Brady cliff jumping 30 feet in Costa Rica all over the internet this weekend. According to our NFL insiders and former general managers, Phil Savage and Mark Dominic say language prohibits sports such as hand gliding. That's often written in. Secondly, if a player is hurt doing extreme sports, it's on the player, not the team. Also, as other former GMs have pointed out, a guy could get hurt in the shower, falling in their home, chasing a dog. So extreme activity on vacation doesn't necessarily raise the risk of injury. Having said all of that, the Patriots do have video of Tom Brady's cliff jumping on their website. Now, I had Tim Hasselbeck in earlier. I cliff dived when I was a college kid.
Yeah, but now you're an adult. Would you do it again? 30-foot jump. We want to know. Would you do it?
I'm not
indoors. You're not jumping in water.
No. Be honest with the audience. What you're doing right now is very transparent. Look at Vince's.
We're never intellectually dishonest. Come on.
Look at. Turn the mic on. Let people hear what Vince.
Everything told me to talk.
Vince, turn the mic on. Let's turn it on. Turn on the mic. John, that's what you do. You run the board. Turn the mic on. You know the rules. I want people to hear Vince laughing. Okay. Vince is using this as an opportunity to start a stunt. This is what happens.
I don't know why you're so reticent to it.
Well, because I'm being used by you guys to break an ankle.
So you said it's not that big of a deal, and now you won't do it.
I can see through.
You're just a scared 50-year-old. That's all it is.
He is as transparent at a used bar of Neutrogena soap. I can see right. Here's the whole thing. Well, every third year I say something stupid, and then what happens is Vince is like, "That's a great idea for a stunt." We do it, and it sets a record here. They've all set records. But the problem is I have to go through all the work to get ready for these stupid physical stunts.
But you're the one saying stupid things, so
No.
you gotta back it up.
No.
I'm with Vince here.
No. I jumped off Soap Lake. There were cliffs in Ephrata, Washington, and I jumped off them. And I did it. And I had a couple brewskis with a bunch of guys. There was a bunch of guys. In fact, one of the guys is named Dan Shelton, lives in Atlanta. Another guy was named Max, who lives in Washington.
I know a guy named Dan Shelton. We can recreate this. Let's do it.
If you're listening, Dan, it's 1-888-SAY-ESPN. I did it with 5 guys. There was a guy named Max. There was a guy named Brent Weaker from Seattle. There was Dan Shelton. There was Jeff Bradbury, who lived in Puyallup, Washington. Terry Hollingsworth. They were all my college guys. I remember.
We'll get you some craft beers. You can, take the edge off and then jump off the edge.
But I remember when I jumped off, and I did it a couple times. It's scary. I'm not going to lie. It's 30 feet in the air. I don't love heights, but I've always tried to conquer something I'm afraid of. So I jumped off this cliff in Ephrata, Washington. It was Soap Lake or Ephrata, one of these. It was awesome. It was the central Washington's hot as Haiti. It's like Africa hot, and the water is freezing. So it's like 39 degrees, 40 degree, like cold ice lake water. So, Vince already has it sold to sponsors, this jumping off the 30, and it's ridiculous.
Colin Cowherd. The Thundering Herd Podcast.
It is interesting. Our Final Four is going to be Kentucky, Wisconsin, and then Duke and Michigan State. Duke is going to beat Michigan State. I think Wisconsin's got a shot against Kentucky. I think Kentucky will win, and I have Kentucky beating Duke 77-70. I am surprised by how many people just think there's nothing good that comes out of one and dones. And it should be duly noted that not all the Kentucky players are freshmen. There are a couple of sophomores, the Harrison twins. There's a junior. They have canceled senior night at Kentucky, but there are underclassmen on this team. But I am amazed by how many people are people that cover college basketball. This one and done is terrible. No, it's not. The same media people saying that, like the same media people that criticize Lane Kiffin for leaving Tennessee after a year, the same phonies are on message boards wanting Brian Kelly out at Notre Dame after a year. Fans are phonies when it comes to this. I mean, I love fans, but they can be complete hypocrites. Fans want to run Steve Sarkisian out at USC. He won 9 games in his first year with 8 true freshmen starting. It's the most wins ever for a first-year USC coach. And you got fans that are like calling, but yet if he left, you would be outraged. So which is it? You're the guy that wants to fool around on your wife in the first year of marriage, but if she left you'd call her all sorts of names. Bunch of phonies. So if you want to know why coaches hop and jump and bounce from program to program, because go to your message board 1 hour. Go to your message board, your local bucknuts.com. Tighter Insider. You're trying to run guys out in a rail 5 games into their career, and you wonder why they want to bounce and go to other programs. God, Gene Chizik won a national title at Auburn. 2 hours later, he was out of work. Mark Ricks won 10 games a year at Georgia forever, and half the fans want him gone. So, and I just don't understand all this one-and-done stuff. The same media banging on one-and-done are the same guys that in the newspaper industry would jump to another newspaper in an hour if any of them were still viable. Like in my business, radio and TV people have always bounced around. That's because there's a lot of radio and TV stations. There's just not many newspapers around anymore, so you get the job you have, you get your pension. It's the best you can hope for. But I see so many, I'm the first person. I've always said I'm conditionally loyal. I'm loyal to my kids. But, I look all the time for opportunities here at ESPN and elsewhere. You should, too. It's not that I don't love the company. But the world's changing, and you have to, good Lord, I used to do local television sports. That's done. Every job I've had is evaporated. Seriously. AM radio's the next. So every job I've ever had, the industry dies. So I've had to be on my toes looking. Well, Kentucky basketball players, they go to Kentucky. Shouldn't they be looking? They're looking for the next opportunity. I don't understand it. I really don't. I just see the world differently, I guess. I just do not understand. We would tell kids to leave Stanford early to go create a new company, and that company, even with good angel investors, would probably tank. But if a black kid goes and plays hoops and leaves, it's somehow the problem with the NCAA is the NCAA and unethical coaches and administrators. It's not the kid. The kid's not the problem with the sport. I don't understand. There's part of America I don't get. Tell me where I'm wrong. Kentucky is the most watched and interesting team in the tournament. And the kids play hard, and they play defense, and they pass, and they're selfless. They go to class. They have class. What's wrong with that? I don't get it. It's not the star prize basketball pupil's job to keep college basketball popular. That's college basketball's job. Steve, you're in the herd. Go ahead.
Yeah, Colin, I agree. I don't get it either. First of all, there's other kids that play athletics that leave. Jordan Spieth is a great example. He was one and done. He was 19. He left Texas. He went to play pro golf. You hear nothing about it. Tennis players, they don't hardly go to high school or college because they're playing so young. It happens all the time. And I don't get what the interest is of people that they are one and done. Are they saying they're not, getting the education they need for society, or are they saying, it's hurting the sport? To me, there's many of kids who go to college 1 year and go, man, either I party too much or this is just not for me, and then they drop out of college.
Right.
It happens all the time. It's not just these kids. And, I don't know what they're worried about. I guess that's my thing. What are these people worried about with these kids?
Steve, it's really funny. Do you realize, Steve, I'll give you a guess. What percentage of Major League Baseball players have a college degree, Steve? Guess.
Oh, well, you got a lot of Dominicans. A lot of people from other countries. So I don't know, but I guess it's pretty low.
3%.
3%.
So, okay, 3. So now a lot of it is Dominican. A lot of it is because to make the bigs, you have to go into travel baseball, and you don't have time to do travel baseball and get a college degree. So the point is, why is it that nobody makes a big deal out of white baseball players who basically, because of drecky travel baseball, never even go to college? But if a college basketball player does and goes for 2 years, somehow he is a fringe American and he is hurting sports. Baseball basically is overwhelming Dominican and white kids. And they don't get college degrees because to be great in baseball, you got to play a lot, be in summer leagues, be in youth leagues. You don't go to college. The lowest percentage of college graduates is not hockey, is not basketball, is not football. It's baseball by a mile. Why isn't that a story? Why isn't travel baseball somehow socioeconomically getting in the way of aspirational, educational opportunities? Who cares? They're pursuing a dream. It's just the kids are pursuing a dream. Go for it, kids. It's awesome. And I think the Kentucky kids are good kids. They're good kids. God, they can all average 20 a game, and they're all team players. How do you watch? What's the difference between watching Wisconsin and watching Kentucky? It's the same team. They bust their tail. They've got some offensive limitations. There's 1 or 2 stars for each. They're the same teams. I mean, it's the same basic principle. Play really, really, really good defense, and offensively, get the ball to the really good player. Frank the Tank or the Towns kid? Rich, you're in the herd. Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of just want to back you up, and I think that we as a society and schools need to change up a little bit, because as a college student, I had to take philosophy and anatomy and everything in my first year. I think for these student athletes, if we want to go student with it, we need to change it up, and we need to go like money management 101, or how to talk to the media, or how to interview and hire people. So when they do leave after a year, they've actually put something in place that can help them when they start their pro career. Cause if they get into basketball, they need to back them up with the schooling and give them the chance to take their own electives that's going to help them. I just think we need to jump on board and start supporting them instead of complaining about it.
Yeah, Rich, it's very interesting you say that. I think that's really, really interesting, is that if these college basketball players to Kentucky had classes that helped them, like money management, it's a great point. My wife talks about this all the time. What you should really have in American high schools now, honestly, is almost like college, like majors. Like, what do you want to do? High schools, geography, who gives a rip? You should literally have computer science classes mandatory, language classes mandatory. You should you got to take Spanish. You got to take computer science. And because that's the future of the country. Half the classes in high school are a waste of time. You should have to take a real estate class. Do you understand how titles and mortgages work? Because you're going to own a home. Money, financial management classes. I mean, changing the curriculum, I am completely for. We're just living in an outdated world. That's why I've never had a problem with culinary school, vocational schools. If you know what you want to do at 17 and you want to play guitar, brother, go chase it. If it's 15 years old, you want to be the next Anthony Bourdain, go to a culinary school. Well, why would you go to college? What in the world is the University of Vermont going to do for you? Dude, smoke out. But truthfully, go to a culinary school.
Check out The Herd with Colin Cowherd weekdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNradio.com, and on ESPNU. The Thundering Herd Podcast.
I'm George Sedano, and on the latest NBA Lockdown podcast, Al Horford dashes the Wizards' hopes, possibly, and have the Warriors figured things out against the Grizzlies. Download the podcast at ESPN.com/PodCenter.
Two of baseball's best go head-to-head in interleague action when the Tigers head to St. Louis to face the Cardinals.
That one is gone.
The pregame at 7 Eastern, first pitch at 8, Sunday on ESPN and ESPN Radio.